So I'm glad this has come to us because I was one of the trustees who was really pushing for it to come. And I need to be really frank here that I thought that this would be much easier. And as I started to read all the public comment that was coming in, and I contacted teachers and admins and former admins and district staff, and even spoke to some of our officers themselves and participated with Officer Bobbitt during one of the city's engagements. It became clear that our SROs have absolutely done some great work for us. And I want to echo Trustee Crosby's thanks for that work. But it also is clear that there are some problems. And I think we have an opportunity here to reimagine what this relationship is going to look like. Because I think, as Trustee Crosby also pointed out, there are going to be times, whether we formally disband the SRO program, where we are going to have engagement with law enforcement. And we want that to be productive and collaborative. So no matter what happens with this program, whether we keep it, eliminate it altogether, or scale it back, I want us to have a productive relationship with our police. This has kept me up most nights for the last couple of weeks. Because, as I said, I thought this would be easy. But I'm very concerned with seeing the data that clearly disproportionately shows that particularly our Hispanic and Latinx students are disproportionately on the receiving end of arrests and encounters with our SROs. And I'm wondering, is there any explanation for that? Because it's alarming.
Yeah, I can talk and speak to the data that was provided in the report. And I think you're referencing the large number of Hispanic students that were arrested. If you look, and I'll refer back to Trustee Sweeney's comments about if you look at the total number of arrests based on the number of students, and let's just think of high school students alone. One incident that occurred at one of our local high schools involved a fight that involved students of a certain race. And as a result of that, understanding, like other trustees have mentioned, we have to keep our students safe. We have to keep our staff safe. If you look at the numbers, and I think the data was provided at one high school, that one incident involved several students. So if you were to evaluate that incident and take the number down from 8 to 2, then your percentages would drop drastically. The other thing that I would like to mention is when we talk about arrests, most people would think it's when we're putting a student in handcuffs and transporting them to jail. The data, when it talks about arrests or referrals, if you look at the data between the 2 years, the number of students that were actually transported to juvenile hall was 1. So when you think about referrals, when you think about arrests, what we're trying to do is our goal is not to place handcuffs on our students. And I speak, as a, product of Fremont Unified School District, growing up in the community as an African American. We don't focus on arresting children of color. It's important that you understand that our goal is to provide resources, referrals through resources, through diversion, the programs that we've talked about. It's really to help the kids. and what Trustee Sweeney had mentioned earlier about, other things, and what you had mentioned, the resource part. One of the callers talked about, they were somewhat offended that there was a reference to a sexual assault. Well, we do have data, we do have true stories of how we have been resources for our students. And understand, our goal will always be to protect the community. If you call the police, we will come. Will we be delayed if we're not in schools? Of course, it's nice to have an officer on site. But, for perspective, in the R for resource is a case at one of our local high schools where a young student was suicidal. And a friend of that student was very concerned. And that friend had built a tremendous relationship with her SRO and felt comfortable and confident to approach that SRO and share with him that her friend was suicidal. And that SRO, understand they do receive crisis intervention training, was able to talk to the student in crisis and get her help. And as a result of that's just one incident, that child is alive today.
And I appreciate that, but I'm wondering also if we had a social worker on campus and a student had built a relationship with a social worker, a student may have gone to that professional for the same thing. The fact that the option was the SRO is a function of us having an SRO rather than a social worker on campus. And what I think has happened, and through the best of intentions, I think our SROs have taken on roles and responsibilities that are really important, and they do things that are vital. But I'm not sure that's the way it should be. And what if we decide that we want to look at this and maybe dismantle the way we currently have things, I want to do it in a way that we don't leave a void. I want to be very thoughtful about, I don't want to just drop the SROs without having hired social workers, right? So I think I agree with what I've heard some of the commentary from some of the other trustees and community members that it really makes no sense for us to be paying for things during shutdown. And so I would like us to take a look at that. There have been very few silver linings with this COVID pandemic, but there is one here, is that gives us some time. That in the next few months, we're probably going to be realistically in lockdown, at least off of our campuses, at least through January, if not the whole year. And that gives us time to really evaluate what are the functions that, if any, that we feel like can be filled by no one other than law enforcement. What are functions that can be filled by other professionals, and can we get those people in place so that if we decide to, change the relationship we have with Fremont PD, that we aren't leaving a void? Because I am concerned. I understand what the 5150 code says about who has the authority to do that, and I think that is a very fundamentally, it's a systemic problem with the way that law is written. A mental health professional should be able to 5150 a student without the involvement of law enforcement. Now, I know sometimes you actually need law enforcement because the situation has reached that level, but it seems absurd to me that our school psychologists, I understand maybe our school counselors who have a different level of training, but a school psychologist who is a mental health professional cannot 5150 a student without law enforcement involvement. But that's the situation that we currently have right now. So it's hard to, we need a way to fill that void. If we're going to change this relationship, we can't leave folks without the ability to to take care of some of those problems. And I don't want our admins to be left with no training about how to maybe take over some of these responsibilities that that maybe should have been theirs all along. And I just feel like this is so much more complicated and difficult than I had anticipated, but I would really like for us to critically think about how we're going to move forward and very likely scale back the current kind of relationship that we have with Fremont PD while maintaining a positive relationship.
I absolutely respect that, Trustee Jones. And it is tough. You know, and I do appreciate what you have mentioned, and you know, it's a number of different types of resources. And the one thing we haven't approached is school shootings. You know, I do have some experience, and I'll tell you, when we talk about resources, when we talk about having officers available, an incident at Irvington High School when Dr. Morris was the superintendent, where there was a call, a student reported seeing a man on campus with a gun. We had an SRO on campus that put that over the radio, and we were able to have over 35 police officers respond to protect our children. Now, it's important that we were able to get there that fast, and part of that is because the SRO was on campus. Without that SRO, that student would either use a cell phone or go into the office and call the police department, and then we would respond. But that SRO knew that school, knew where every classroom was able to direct officers in. And, you know, it's those kind of things that we always want to prepare for. And, you know, like Trustee Sweeney mentioned earlier and several others, it's a variety of resources that we provide. And, you know, as a young student growing up in Fremont, it's important that we protect our children.